didn't invite my stepbrother to my wedding, sparking unexpected family drama that somehow led to us all finding new harmony. I am a 26-year-old man, and in about 3 months, I'll be getting married. My fiancé and I just sent out wedding invitations last week, and people have started receiving them. We decided on a destination wedding with around 70 guests. Almost exactly half of those guests are immediate family. There's some important background I should share. My parents divorced 5 or 6 years ago. At the time, I was already in college and out of the house, and my younger sister wasn't far behind me. The divorce was acrimonious, and their relationship has never recovered, not even for important moments in their kids' lives. At my college graduation, for example, I had to split the day between them, lunch with one, dinner with the other, and they sat on opposite sides of the ceremony just to avoid crossing paths. They wouldn't even agree to be in the same photo, so I had to take pictures with one parent in one spot, then move to another spot for photos with the other. We did something similar for my sister's graduation. Things escalated before my sister's wedding a couple of years ago. My dad was uninvited at the last minute, so he and my sister have been no contact ever since. For all practical purposes, my parents are also essentially no contact now. They've only had to be in the same place for graduations and my sister's wedding. Since then, my dad has gotten remarried, about 2 or 3 years ago, to my stepmom, who has an adopted son around my age, early 20s. My mom is still single. I don't have any sort of relationship with my stepbrother. I haven't seen him in at least 2 years. We don't share holidays, and when my dad, stepmom, fiancé, and I get together for lunch, the stepbrother never joins. I'm not connected to him on social media, don't have his number. Literally, the only things I know about him are through my stepmom. I'm not closed off if a relationship with him ever develops, but right now, it just doesn't exist. We live about 2 hours from my dad, stepmom, and stepbrother, as well as my mom, who lives in the same general area. My sister lives farther away. It would require a flight, though she's still in the country. My fiancé's family is much farther, 8 hours away, but on the drive there, you pass through where my dad, stepmom, stepbrother, and mom all live. When my dad and stepmom received their invitation, it kicked off a text conversation that included my fiancé. This is how it went down. My stepmom texted, "Got the invitation today. Curious why, stepbrother, wasn't invited?" Pretty hurtful to me, considering he'd only be one person. I answered the next morning, "Good morning. Our wedding guest list was finalized to people we currently have close personal relationships with and existing family arrangements. For that reason, stepbrother was not invited." What I meant by existing family arrangements is that my fiancé's family generously offered to pay about 70% of the wedding expenses in exchange for choosing 10 invitees of their own, and we agreed. My fiancé and I are covering the remaining 30%. We made all these agreements around 9 months ago. Neither of my parents contributed financially to the wedding. My dad answered quickly, "That's a very stoic and non-heartfelt answer. I thought you were raised better than that. Looks like I failed." Stepbrother is legally your family now also. So what is your definition of existing family arrangements? Sorry for the truth, but it hurts my heart. And where is your Christianity in all of this? Please try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and please feel. I love you and always will, your dad. I told him, "Dad, I love you too. I won't debate my character, faith, or upbringing over a wedding guest list. Our decisions weren't based on legal definitions of family, but on the relationships we actually have in our lives." For example, my fiancé's biological mom isn't invited for the same reason. There's no relationship there. My fiancé has been no contact with her mom for the last 4 years because of an abusive relationship. Legal family status didn't play a role in our invitations. When I mentioned arrangements, I meant long-standing agreements related specifically to the wedding planning with my fiancé's family. I don't want to go into details, but those are separate from personal relationships. My stepmom replied later that morning, "It is unfair that your father wasn't invited to your engagement party until the last minute." For context, we hosted our engagement party, but only invited my mom's side of the family. My dad told me he didn't want to be anywhere near them and declined to get an invite. At the last minute, my mom's family canceled, so I re-invited my dad, and for him not to be allowed at the parent city shower. That was a shower my mom was hosting. He had to drive 6 hours just a few days before Christmas to even be part of celebrating his son and daughter-in-law. This was a shower that my fiancé's family hosted. She also brought up that I had clearly told my dad not to come to the city the night before my surgery. I had an orthopedic surgery in August, and my fiancé had already planned to take off work to help me before and after. I told my dad and stepmom to come visit 3 days after, which they agreed to, but canceled last minute. She said he was told not to come at all, but to be there he'd have to leave at 2 a.m. The night before my surgery, my dad insisted on coming up anyway to be there for the operation, even though I'd explained how early it was and that my fiancé had everything handled. He said, "I am your father." So I let him come. He was helpful both before and after surgery. She continued, "When I tried addressing these things, I had no idea what your plans were, but it felt like I was being told I disrespected your fiancé. To be clear, I was only worried about my husband with a heart condition having to drive so far at that hour. And I'll tell you, your dad would never admit this, but he's deeply hurt. Open and honest communication are crucial to relationships. Your dad's feelings have been hurt by all the above, but he was afraid to tell you because he thought you might uninvite him from the wedding. Your father loves my stepbrother, and he has apologized to me for him not being invited. Stepbrother has helped your dad any time he needed it. I feel it is deeply disrespectful to your father not to acknowledge his newer family. I have cried many tears over the past several months about our relationship, because I feel it has deteriorated. So has your father. He didn't want me to tell you sooner, he was scared you would disown him the way your sister did. You have no idea how he cries over her and still reaches out to her regularly. And that is where we stand. I want to share what I've been going through lately, as it's been weighing heavily on me. I've always done my best to make my stepchild feel like family. When planning outings, I made a conscious effort not to invite my own son, the stepbrother, because I wanted to focus on building the bond between my new husband and his child. My goal was always creating an environment where it truly felt like we were one family. But I realize now there were times when it may not have come across that way. If my actions ever made it seem otherwise, I want to sincerely apologize for that. My intention has never been to make anyone feel excluded. Recently, wedding plans have put gasoline on old fires. I decided not to attend the wedding. I want things to go as smoothly as possible for everyone involved, and honestly, I can't shake the feeling that the invitation was extended to me just to keep the peace with my husband, not out of genuine desire. My absence is my attempt at de-escalation, and I'm sorry if this decision has added to the confusion now that I finally have a chance to speak for myself. If it were up to me, I would have had all these things out in the open a lot sooner. Let me switch hats for a moment. As a divorced mother and a therapist, I have to say this: neither of you should ever feel like you're being forced to pick a side between parents. But lately, it feels like that's exactly what's happening. My son has seen firsthand how his father and I don't always see eye to eye, but we absolutely refuse to let either of us be disrespected in front of him. We've made a real effort to be there, together, at important events, to show up for him as a united front when it matters most. Of course, I still get those epic eye rolls from my son whenever I remind him to keep in touch with his dad, and I'm sure his father gets them, too, whenever he tells our son to treat me with respect. I've also encouraged my son to be respectful and courteous to his dad's long-term partner, just as I am, because we're all adults and, at the end of the day, children deserve to be surrounded and loved by as many people as possible. That's just the way I see it. Parents made the decision to have children together, and like it or not, we're bound by that for life. Divorce brings new relationships into the picture, and that's just something everyone has to accept. I know my husband can remain polite as long as he isn't constantly provoked, and to be perfectly honest, both he and I have been attacked and pushed to our limits, which eventually led him to block his ex's number years ago. At a certain point, I had to step back and redraw the boundaries of these family discussions. The original issue was supposed to be about the wedding guest list. But somehow, that conversation ballooned into so much more: the engagement party, bridal showers, health scares, like my surgery, my own family, my son and his father, the whole philosophy around divorce and blended families, all the broader family baggage, and everything that's gone wrong before. These are separate issues, and I don't want to tackle them under the stressful cloud of wedding planning, or worse, through endless text messages. I'm open, though, to talking through all of it on the phone. There's no risk that I'll be uninvited from the wedding for having an honest conversation, but if there is going to be that conversation, I want it to be directly with my husband, not filtered or mediated through someone else. If he's willing, we can work out a time to talk. I've always been open to communication. As for the wedding itself, I respect my decision not to go, and I genuinely hope things go well that day. I was invited because there is a real relationship there, and that means something to me. Regardless of everything else, you both will still be in my heart. 2 days after her last message, an unknown number called me while I was at my desk. I let it go to voicemail because I was in a meeting, and when I stepped out, I listened to a quiet, careful voice introduce himself as my stepbrother. He said he'd gotten screenshots of the text chain from his mom, that he didn't want to be the cause of more arguing, and that if I had 10 minutes sometime, he'd appreciate the chance to clear the air. I called him back on my drive home. He was blunt right away: I didn't expect an invite. I didn't ask for one. I really don't want you thinking I was behind any of that. He told me he works nights at a distribution center and sleeps odd hours, that he keeps to himself, and that the idea of being dragged into a family feud over a wedding for someone he's never actually hung out with felt pretty insane. Then he said he'd meet us for coffee if we wanted, somewhere halfway. We met him the next morning at a diner off the highway, the kind of place with cracked leather booths and a chalkboard that still had last month's special written on it. He showed up early and had already ordered black coffee and a cinnamon roll. When we sat down, he looked almost embarrassed to be there. He didn't waste time. I told my mom I'm not going, invited or not, he said. I told your dad too. This got twisted into a thing that makes me look like I'm kicking down the door to your wedding, and I promise that's the last thing I want. He explained that most of the times he saw my dad were at the house fixing something or moving furniture. He said my stepmom cares a lot about doing blended family the right way and that sometimes doing it the right way turns into a scoreboard in her head. He didn't say it cruelly. It sounded like a son protecting his mother even while disagreeing with her. Halfway through, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down, sighed, and turned the screen so I could see. It was a text from my stepmom. If he changes his mind, I can still find a place for him to stand with the groomsmen. It would mean so much to your father. He typed back, Mom, please stop. We talked. He looked at me and said, for what it's worth, I'm happy to meet you without all of them between us. We can do this later, after the wedding, with less noise. We talked about normal things after that, work, music, my fiancé's job, and left with a promise to grab a beer sometime when we all weren't braced for impact. I drove home feeling oddly lighter. I called my dad and told him we'd just had coffee with my stepbrother. He went very quiet. Then he asked, too carefully, what did he say? I told him exactly what I wrote above, that he didn't expect an invite, didn't want to be used as a wedge, and that we'd made a plan to get to know each other without attaching it to the wedding. My dad exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. Well, that's good, he said. That's good. Then, after a pause, you know your stepmom's heart is in the right place. I told him I believe that, and that her heart and her methods might not match right now. I asked if he'd be willing to talk just the two of us, no phones held up on speaker, no one feeding lines from the kitchen. He agreed and suggested he call me early the next morning from his office at work. The next morning, he did. It was the best conversation we've had in years. He admitted he felt blindsided by the engagement party stuff and that he'd been carrying around anger like it was proof of loyalty to himself. He said he hated how my sister's wedding ended and lives with that choice every day. He cried a little when he said her name. Then, almost like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve, he asked if he could give a toast at our reception. 1 minute, he said. Not even. I'll write it down. I want to be part of it. Not just a seat in the room. I told him we'd capped toasts a long time ago and sent that list to the DJ, and that I didn't want to change anything else about the program, but that I wanted him with me at the rehearsal lunch on the morning of, if he wanted. He said yes. He said he'd be there early to help me tie my tie and stand in that dumb hotel lighting with me when the photographer needs groom with dad shots. He made me laugh for the first time in this whole mess. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That same afternoon, our venue coordinator called me with what she thought was a funny question. Do you want me to move your cousin Matt to your father's table? He just called to add himself and we didn't have him on your spreadsheet. We don't have a cousin Matt. When I called the hotel block, they confirmed a room had been booked under my dad's last name for a Matthew, last name, with my stepmom's email attached. I stared at the confirmation and called my stepmom. Straight to voicemail. I texted her simply, please don't do this. We spoke. Boundaries aren't a test. No answer. I texted my stepbrother a screenshot of the hotel email with one line, is this you? And he responded in about 30 seconds, no. Not me. I told them no. He followed with, I'll call the hotel myself. An hour later, my dad called back sounding angry and rattled. I just found out about Matt, he said, spitting the fake name like it burned. I told her to cancel it. I told her this isn't. He stopped. I'm sorry, he said, like the words cost him. I am sorry this keeps spilling over. I am coming to your wedding. By myself if I have to. He also asked if I could please send him the seating chart so he could make sure he wasn't near my mom. I told him he wouldn't be. Then he lowered his voice and asked if he could still bring my stepmom if she changed her mind. I told him she was invited and always had been. That invitation didn't come with a lever to pull on other people. I thought we were finally steady. Then, last night, my fiancé and I got an email from our officiant, my fiancé's childhood pastor, saying my stepmom had reached out to him through his church contact form. She'd asked for 5 minutes at the start of the ceremony for a statement about family and said she was willing to keep it non-denominational. He sent it to us with a polite note asking whether this was part of the program that we'd forgotten to mention. We hadn't. I sat on our couch with my laptop open, trying to decide if I was more shocked or just numb. I wrote my stepmom one final message. I kept it short. I said I was grateful she loved my dad and wanted to stand up for their family, and that she was invited because I have a real relationship with her. I said I would not be restructuring our wedding to satisfy anyone's philosophy or pain. I told her I wasn't moving any seats, adding any toasts, or handing over the microphone to anyone outside the plan we set months ago. I told her if she chose to come, I would be happy to see her and introduce her to my friends as my stepmother. If she chose not to come, I would miss her. I ended with, I am your husband's son. Please meet me where I am. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a single line from her, I hear you. Then, like she couldn't help herself, a second, please don't shut the door on us. I didn't. I answered with the door isn't shut. No hearts, no thumbs up, just the kind of sentence you send when you've decided to stop arguing and start living with the choices you've already made. This morning, my dad RSVP'd one. My stepmom hasn't changed her response. The hotel canceled Matt. My stepbrother sent me a picture of himself on a break at work, hairnet and all, holding up a grape Gatorade like a toast. He wrote, beer after the honeymoon. I'll even let you pick the place. And for the first time since the invitations went out, I feel like I can picture my wedding again without also seeing every old bruise under the tux. We left for the venue on a Thursday, with the kind of weather that makes you think the universe might actually be on your side for once. Blue sky, a breeze, the air not trying to sit on your chest. The rehearsal plan had been set for weeks. My dad texted he'd be there for the lunch. He didn't make it. He called halfway through appetizers, voice thin with static and apology, saying he was stuck dealing with a last-minute crisis at work and would be on the road by night. "I'll be there in the morning," he said. "Early?" Tying early. I believed him. We went to bed before midnight out of self-preservation. At 1:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a number I'd saved as SB. After the diner. "Don't freak out," the text said. "I'm in the garage. Your dad's asleep. He didn't want to call you and stress you out. I figured I'd get him here and disappear, like we said." I put on sneakers and took the elevator down to the echoey concrete where cars look stranger than they do in daylight. He was leaned against a dented Civic with a blanket folded over the passenger. When I opened the door, my dad startled like a movie extra and then blinked up at me, smiling in that soft, guilty way. "I took the pill I'm supposed to take for my heart when it gets jumpy and it made me drowsy," he said. He wouldn't let me drive after that. He meant my stepbrother. We did the world's quietest handoff. My stepbrother kept his promise and didn't come upstairs. He stuck out his hand and said, "Congrats, man. I'm going to get pancakes somewhere not here so your guest count doesn't mysteriously change." He grinned and, for a second, looked exactly our age. Before he left, he pulled an envelope from his hoodie pocket with my name written on it like someone had told him to take his time. "From my mom," he said. "No tricks. Read it whenever." I tucked it in my jacket and watched his taillights hop their way up the exit ramp. My dad put a palm on my shoulder in the elevator and didn't take it off until the doors opened. Morning came too fast and somehow I wasn't tired. My dad knocked on my door 15 minutes before he said he would, tie draped around his neck like a patient waiting room gown. He'd brought a little square jewelry box lined with blue satin and set it on the desk like it might run away. Inside were my grandfather's cufflinks, simple, oval, the kind of metal that doesn't pretend to be anything else. "I've been carrying them in my sock drawer for 20 years like I was waiting for a reason," he said, and then we both got quiet for the exact same amount of time. He stood behind me in the full-length mirror and did the dad thing with a tie, fingers patient, tongue half out in concentration. The photographer asked if we could just do it one more time for a clean shot and my dad laughed. It wasn't clean the first time, and did it anyway. The ceremony was outside, under a hill that angled the light just right even for the photos nobody frames. The pastor, I still can't call him by his first name even though I'm technically allowed to, smiled when he took his place. He didn't mention a statement or a family philosophy or anything but us and the vows we'd written, which made both of us sound braver than we feel most days. During the processional, I didn't look at the seats. I stared down at my hands and at my fiancée like I was memorizing her. When we finally turned to walk back up the aisle together, I saw her. Back row, I'll seat, a dress that didn't compete with anything, hands knotted around a program like it could bite. My stepmom didn't stand. She didn't wave. She just let her eyes track us until we passed and then down again, like she'd agreed with herself not to make the day rhyme with any other day. At the cocktail hour, our coordinator, who I would gladly name a child after at this point, stuck close enough to be helpful and far enough to blend into flowers. She slid a place card into my palm at one point the way magicians hand you a coin. "Found this on the escort table," she murmured. It said Matthew, last name, in my fiancée's aunt's perfect calligraphy, which meant someone had handed her a name she trusted when she'd been writing them out weeks ago. I looked up at my dad and he just shook his head once, like a teacher asking a whole room to settle down. "Not now," he said. He put the card in his jacket pocket like evidence he'd take home and lock in a drawer. Toasts went exactly like the spreadsheet said they would. My best man made people laugh without bringing up a single story that would get me fired. Her maid of honor told a story about a road trip that made two aunts cry into napkins. My dad didn't speak into the microphone. He didn't even hover near it. He caught my eye toward the end and made a little 2 minutes gesture with his fingers. We stepped into the hallway by the ice machine where hotel carpets go to sulk. He pulled a folded index card from his pocket. "I wrote the minute," he said, and then he read it to me. It wasn't polished. It didn't have a line made to make a crowd clap. It was just the truest thing he's said to me since I left home, how he doesn't know how to be good at endings and starts pounding the walls of whatever room he's in when he feels one coming on, how he wants to be better at beginnings, how he hopes this one is a door he doesn't slam by accident. He stuck the index card back in his pocket and said, "That was for you, not for the room," and then we went back to clinking glasses and dumb inside jokes like we hadn't just taken a screwdriver to something rusted shut. I didn't see my stepmom at the reception, and I didn't ask anyone to go find out if she was in the building. The absence felt deliberate, and for the first time, not like a threat. After we did the songs and the handshakes and the cake that looked too pretty to eat until someone shoved a fork in it, my dad and I stood near the exit and he hugged every person who walked by like they were the last one who might forgive him for something he hadn't told them about. Then he squared his shoulders and stepped outside. She was there on the curb, looking small in the way confident people do when they finally run out of script. He kissed her cheek. He said something I didn't hear. She looked over his shoulder at me. I lifted my hand and gave a little wave, the kind you give a neighbor you see on the sidewalk twice a week. She did the same and didn't take a step toward me. It felt like a promise and a boundary at the same time. We got back to our room after midnight with our shoes in our hands like teenagers sneaking in. I took off my jacket and the envelope from my stepbrother landed on the carpet. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my stepmom's neat handwriting, the kind she probably learned before nurses stopped using cursive. She wrote that she had wanted 5 minutes and then 10 and then the whole microphone, and that none of that was actually about me. She wrote that she's been trying to build a bridge by yelling at the river. She wrote, "I hear you again," and under it, "I am trying to learn how to not make everything a test." At the bottom, in a different pen and a slant that didn't match, there was, "Congrats. SB." I laughed and cried at the same time, which is an unsafe way to breathe. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a photo from the same number as the hairnet Gatorade shot. This time it was a greasy plate at a diner, pancakes stacked like someone dared the plate to quit. The caption said, "Best pancakes within 100 miles of your wedding." I did the research. Beer after the honeymoon still stands. A minute later, my dad sent me a picture of the cufflinks on his palm in the hotel light. "You did good," the text said. Underneath it, "I'm driving home with her. It's quiet, but not the bad kind. We have a honeymoon to take and a life to get back to, but sometime after we come home, I'm going to meet my stepbrother at a place with sticky floors and decent fries, and we're going to talk about nothing important on purpose. My dad and I already set a date to watch a baseball game where we'll probably miss half the plays because we won't shut up. I don't know what my stepmom will do next. I don't need to know it in advance to be okay." Walking back up the aisle, past her on the back row, I realized the thing I couldn't picture before wasn't the wedding. It was all of us in the same story without a referee. And then, somehow, there we were. Quiet. Weird. Real, and I didn't feel like a test anyone was going to fail by loving me the way they were able to that day. We got back from the honeymoon with sand still hiding in our suitcases and the kind of jet lag that makes you generous. 2 days later, I texted my stepbrother with 3 words, "Sticky floors tonight?" And he sent me a thumb up and a pin to a bar that looked like a 1998 Pizza Hut grew up and started serving IPAs. He was already there when I walked in, shoulders taking up less space than they needed to, a beer sweating on a napkin like it was trying to apologize for existing. He didn't go big with a greeting. He just stood up, did the quick half hug you give a friend you haven't earned yet, and said, "Fries are above average. The ketchup is in those weird little ramekins," which feels like a policy. It was easy in the way that makes you suspicious something hard is coming later. We talked about nothing on purpose, his manager who schedules like he's doing a crossword puzzle with his eyes closed, my wife's coworker who sends emails in all caps like a grandpa looking for his hearing aid. My phone lit up on the bar with a name that wasn't a name, just the hospital system logo, which is either a tree or a person throwing their arms up, depending on your optimism level. I almost declined it because some part of me has decided I can outrun bad news by not answering promptly. I swiped. A woman with a headset voice confirmed my identity 3 different ways and then said my dad's name like she was setting a glass down carefully. "He's here," she said. "We've admitted him for observation. He asked me to call you. He's stable." Stable. It's the kind of word that holds your ribs up and also makes you sit down. I looked at my stepbrother. He'd already thrown cash on the bar and was shrugging into his jacket. "I'm good to drive," he said, holding up his Coke. "You're not." "We're going." The hospital had that smell, bleach and coffee and something you can't name that makes every conversation happen at half volume. We ended up in a waiting room that looked like a daycare had given up and gone to grad school. A TV in the corner was showing a cooking show with the sound off, noodles being dragged around a pan by a cheerful wrist. My stepmom stood up when we walked in. Her hair was pulled back with a pen in it like she'd been answering questions and ran out of hands. She didn't reach for a hug. She didn't launch into anything. She just said, "Thank you for coming," and there was a scrape in her voice like she'd been swallowing gravel for an hour. "He told them to call you," she added, like it was a credential. "What happened?" I asked. "Atrial flutter," she said, picking each consonant up and putting it where it belonged. "They're talking about medication, maybe a cardioversion if he keeps doing his hummingbird impression. He's making jokes, so you know he's scared." A nurse poked her head in and did the thing where she thinks she's speaking softly but she's projecting for the back row. "We need next of kin for the paperwork," she said, and my stepmom said, "Spouse," and then looked at me, really looked, and said, "And his son." She stepped back so I was in the frame. It was such a small movement that I almost missed it. I didn't. They sent us to the cafeteria because sitting in the hallway was apparently against 4 unposted rules. The cafeteria at midnight is a liminal space where you start to believe in ghosts purely because nobody makes that much tuna salad for the living. My stepmom put a 5 in the vending machine and it ate it whole. She looked at the slot like it had personally insulted her and then laughed at herself, an actual short, embarrassed laugh, which I realized I've never heard from her. "This week I am not in charge of anything that matters," she said to the empty space between us. I think that should have happened to me sooner. We sat with hot chocolate that tasted like brown water and something my stepbrother found that was legally soup. He leaned his chair back on 2 legs the way I did in middle school and told a story about the time he lifted a washing machine into a truck with my dad and the entire machine tried to leave the earth because someone hadn't unplugged it. It wasn't brave or poetic. It was just exactly what was needed to make our breaths line up with each other. My stepmom's hands were restless. She kept folding and unfolding the paper they gave her with my dad's monitor readings on it, like repetition could untangle it. Then she did something I don't think she'd planned. "Could you call your mom?" she asked. Not casual. Not like a test. Like a person asking for help they wouldn't have asked for yesterday. He would want her to know, she said, and the "her" didn't have any teeth in it. The sentence came out fully defanged. I stared at her like she'd just said she'd learned how to breathe underwater. I texted my mom because it felt less like lighting a match in a room full of gas. My mom replied with, "On my way," and then a picture of her keys on the counter like she had to prove motion. We weren't in the room when they did the cardioversion because apparently there are fire codes about how many anxious people can watch electricity do what it does. We were there when my dad opened his eyes and did that thing where he tries to crack wise and the first joke's bad because he hasn't caught his breath yet. He saw my stepbrother first. "You again," he said, which somehow meant "I love you and I'm sorry and thank you" lifted up by one small sentence. Then he saw me and his mouth pulled left like it does when he's trying not to feel anything big in public. His eyes flicked behind me and found her. And then, like a movie you'd call unrealistic if they made it, he saw my mom come around the curtain. Time slowed down in a useful way for once. He hitched on his elbow and then deflated back, and for 2 seconds his face was every age he's ever been. He reached for each of their hands like he was checking inventory. My mom said, "Don't be dramatic," which is the closest she gets to "I was scared." My stepmom didn't add a thesis. She didn't add anything, she just kept holding on. Nobody argued. No one pulled a chair like they were staking a claim on a square of tile. A resident came in with a voice that belonged to someone who still had exams to take and asked about advanced directives, and my stepmom answered in that efficient clip she uses to schedule and protect and then stopped herself. She turned to me. "This is where you're in this with me," she said, and I nodded because there wasn't another option that didn't feel like cowardice. They kept him overnight. Maybe to be safe. Maybe for peace of mind. Maybe because paperwork needs its own 8 hours to feel satisfied. After the adrenaline burned off, we were 4 people in bad chairs trying to stretch without making it look like we were trying to stretch. My stepbrother fell asleep in the posture of a teenager on a school bus. My mom and my stepmom took turns pretending the other wasn't listening when they asked me questions. Work, travel, how the cake tasted when it wasn't a prop. It wasn't friendly. It was workable. Like scaffolding. Like we might build something if the weather holds. Around 3 a.m., my stepmom pulled her phone out and opened her email. I caught a glimpse of a drafted message to my dad's cardiologist with 3 paragraphs of medical history she didn't need to give him yet. She held her thumb over send, breathed, and put the phone face down on the table. "I don't have to fix everything in the dark," she said into the space that had been shared by ex-wife and son and almost stepkid. She wasn't asking for congratulations. She was just narrating the new muscle memory she's trying to learn. When morning finally remembered us, a nurse with kindness that didn't read as professional told us he was going to be fine and would hate the oatmeal. The doctor said something about medications that would keep his heart in line like a hall monitor with a good whistle. My dad did the peek around for an audience and saw he had enough of one. He asked for coffee like he was testing his power. My mom and my stepmom both said, "No," at the same time. They looked at each other. It didn't become anything else. It was a strange little chorus I think I'll hear in my head when I need proof the world can change in increments. Before discharge, a social worker came in with a folder that had my dad's name typed neatly and a highlighter cap wedged onto its clip. My stepmom took it with both hands and then set it in front of me. "You take this," she said. "If I start, you know." She mimed tallying invisible boxes in the air. "Just hand it back." It was the smallest ceremony. It was also the entire point. We filtered out in the way families do when no one knows the choreography yet. My mom hugged my shoulder like we were on bleachers again. She told my stepmom, without looking at her, "Thank you for calling him," and my stepmom replied to the floor, "Thank you for coming." They aren't a united front. They aren't doing holidays together. But for one slow Tuesday morning, they spoke like people who'd stopped auditioning for the judge's chair. On the drive back, my stepbrother and I sat in traffic behind a truck that claimed in vinyl letters it was a mobile knife sharpening experience, which is not a phrase anyone should have to share a road with before lunch. He drummed his fingers on his thigh and then said, like he was sliding a test back across a desk with a grade we both liked, "So, beer after the hospital? Or do we count that hot chocolate as the worst beer you've ever had?" He grinned without watching for my response like he used to. I told him we owed ourselves actual beer, in a place where nothing was beeping, with fries that didn't taste like they'd been born in a break room. He nodded. "Same bar," he said. "Better luck with the vending machines." That night, after my dad sent a selfie from his recliner with the caption, "New meds, same couch," and a string of emojis that made no sense together, a fish, a rocket, a mailbox, I opened the top drawer of our dresser to put my wallet away and found the folded index card from the wedding tucked under my cufflinks. I didn't put it there. My stepmom must have slipped it into the bag my dad carried, which ended up in our room, which delivered it to my drawer like a message folded enough times to become soft. The cheap blue lines ran like small rivers where the ink had bled a little from his sweaty hands. At the bottom, in my dad's crabby print, he'd written beginnings and then underlined it twice like he was trying to convince himself. I don't want to make this sound like a miracle. My stepmom still sent me 2 paragraphs the next day about sodium content with a link to an academic journal I am not qualified to read. My mom called me to say, if he needs a ride to these appointments, I can do it, which means she's already blocked off the time whether he asks or not. My dad texted me a picture of his pill organizer like it was a new gadget. The group chat my stepbrother accidentally made when he tried to send a photo to just me and somehow CC'd all of us is now 4 people deep and has a name my wife picked when she leaned over my shoulder and said, if you're going to keep it, at least make it honest. It's called not a test. 2 days later, I was walking out of our building to get the mail when an envelope skated under the door like it had been pushed there by someone using a fingertip and nerves. My stepmom had written my name on the front in the same neat script from the wedding letter. Inside was a schedule she'd made, Dad's appointments, the times he shouldn't drive, the times he'd pretend he could. There were blank spaces blocked off with the word you, penciled in light enough to erase. At the bottom, in a handwriting that was trying to be casual and failing, she'd written, thank you for handing the microphone back when I don't need it. Under it, in a line I recognized immediately, Fries Friday? SB. I look at the calendar now and for the first time in a long time, it reads like a life instead of a threat board. There are cardiology follow-ups and a baseball game Tuesday where my dad will say he's only coming for 4 innings and stay for 8. There's Fries Friday typed with an emoji my phone doesn't know how to translate and a day next month labeled Mom Garden Thing which is as descriptive as she gets. Nothing dramatic in there. Nothing you could sell tickets to. Just a complicated group of people acting like gravity applies to them, and still showing up. I keep thinking about the vending machine swallowing that $5 bill. The way my stepmom looked at it and then at me and laughed instead of calling a manager. It felt like the universe giving us cheap rehearsal for the next time something small goes wrong in public. It felt like practice. It felt, finally, like we're all starting to learn this one weird instrument together, out of tune and out of rhythm and still somehow making something you can hum on your way back to the car.